My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 42 years old, and I've spent most of my adult life as an electrician. My wife tried to make me raise another man's child, and I'm about to tell you exactly how I made her pay for it. I met Melissa in college when I was 25, working part-time fixing stage lights for the theater department while finishing my electrical engineering degree. She was this bright, ambitious communications major with dreams of climbing the corporate ladder. There was something magnetic about her confidence, the way she talked about her future like it was a certainty rather than a hope. She'd stand in those theater wings, organizing props and directing volunteers, and I'd watch her from my ladder, mesmerized by her energy. "You're good with your hands," she'd said after watching me rewire a particularly stubborn spotlight. It was flirtatious, but also genuine appreciation for skilled work. That combination drew me in completely. We built 15 years together after that. Good years, I thought. I took pride in my honest work, residential and commercial electrical jobs that paid well and kept me busy. Melissa climbed her ladder just like she'd planned, moving from assistant roles to management positions in marketing firms across the city. I supported every promotion, every late night she spent preparing presentations, every networking event that kept her out until midnight. Our life had a steady rhythm. I'd wake up at 6, grab coffee, and head to job sites. She'd emerge an hour later in pressed suits, already on conference calls before she left the driveway. Evenings were for dinner together, shared stories about difficult customers or demanding bosses, and the comfortable intimacy of two people who'd chosen to build something together. Then came her big promotion 8 months ago. Senior Marketing Director at Hartwell & Associates, the kind of position she'd dreamed about since college. I was proud of her, genuinely excited to see her ambition finally rewarded. The salary bump was substantial, enough that we started talking about renovating the kitchen, or maybe taking that European vacation we'd always postponed. But something changed. At first, I attributed it to adjustment stress, new responsibilities, longer hours, the pressure of proving herself in a senior role. Melissa started traveling monthly for client meetings, sometimes twice a month. The late-night meetings multiplied. She'd come home exhausted, barely speaking during dinner before retreating to her laptop for more work. The intimacy died gradually, then completely. For 3 months, every advance I made was met with, "I'm exhausted, honey," or "This project is killing me." She'd flinch when I touched her shoulder while she worked at the kitchen table. In bed, she'd curl to her edge of the mattress, creating a physical gulf that felt like an Arctic divide. I tried to be understanding. Career transitions are stressful. New positions demand extra energy. These were rational explanations for the woman who now treated our bedroom like a cold storage unit, who avoided my eyes during conversations, who seemed to physically recoil from any casual touch. 3 months of rejection. 3 months of sharing a bed with someone who acted like my presence was an unwelcome intrusion. Our conversations became purely functional: grocery lists, bill payments, schedule coordination. The woman who once laughed at my terrible electrical puns now responded to everything with distracted nods and tired sighs. Then, after a 4-day business trip to Chicago in March, everything flipped again. Melissa came through the front door like a different person, suddenly affectionate, almost aggressively so. She dropped her suitcase and wrapped her arms around me with an intensity that felt desperate rather than romantic. That night, she initiated intimacy for the first time in months, but something felt off. Her movements seemed calculated rather than passionate, like she was performing a role rather than expressing desire. The baby talk started the next morning. "I've been thinking," she said over coffee, her voice carrying a breathless excitement that seemed forced. "We should start trying for a baby." The suggestion hit like a physical blow. For 3 months, she wouldn't let me touch her. Now she wanted to conceive? The timing felt not just suspicious, but insulting. "We should research fertility options," she continued, pulling out her phone. "There are all these apps that track ovulation cycles. We could optimize our chances." Her sudden baby fever became obsessive. She researched nursery furniture during her lunch breaks, forwarded me articles about pregnancy vitamins, and brought up children in every conversation. The woman who had frozen me out of our bedroom for months was now talking about converting the spare room and researching pediatricians. I had a convenient excuse to buy time. 2 weeks earlier, I'd injured my back on a job site. Nothing serious, but the muscle relaxers and anti-inflammatory medication temporarily affected my ability to conceive. I used this as a reason to delay while my instincts screamed warnings I couldn't yet articulate. The doctor said these medications can impact fertility, I told her when she pushed for immediate action. We should wait until I'm off them. Her disappointment seemed disproportionate. Not the understanding concern of a loving wife, but the frustrated impatience of someone working against the deadline. When someone goes from refusing to touch you for months to suddenly talking about nursery colors, you don't need to be a detective to know something's wrong. But I was about to become one anyway. I approach problems the same way I approach electrical work. When something doesn't function properly, you trace the circuits until you find where the connection failed. My marriage was showing all the signs of a major short circuit, and I needed to find the fault before it caused more damage. I started with simple observations. Melissa's relationship with her phone had changed completely. She used to leave it charging on the kitchen counter, screen up, notifications visible to anyone walking by. Now it lived in her purse or pocket, always face down, always password protected. When it buzzed during dinner, she'd tense up before checking it, and I'd catch her typing responses with the kind of careful attention reserved for important communications. Her business trip stories didn't align anymore. Small inconsistencies at first, mentioning a restaurant that didn't exist in the city she claimed to visit, or describing a client meeting scheduled for a time when that company's website showed they were closed for a company retreat. When I'd ask casual follow-up questions, her explanations became more elaborate, each detail requiring additional supporting lies. I started documenting these patterns like I'd document electrical problems. Credit card statements showed restaurant charges that didn't match her claimed meetings. Hotel receipts from cities she never mentioned visiting. Rental car charges for trips she said involved only conference venues. The financial trail painted a picture completely different from her verbal reports. The most telling pattern involved her boss, Richard Hartwell. His name appeared more frequently in her conversation, always with a subtle shift in tone. Not the way you mention a demanding supervisor, but with an undertone that made my skin crawl. She'd quote his opinions on industry trends, mention his insights about client management strategies, reference his feedback on her work with the kind of detailed attention that suggested much longer conversations than typical. Boss-employee interactions. Richard thinks the Morrison account could be expanded into a full campaign, she'd say. And there was something in how she said his name, a familiarity that felt too intimate for a professional relationship. After 2 weeks of observation, I made the decision that would change everything. My coworker Jake had caught his wife cheating 3 years earlier and recommended a private investigator named Adrian Ross. I struggled with the moral weight of investigating my own wife, but I framed it as protecting myself from further deception. If I was wrong, I'd apologize and work on rebuilding trust. If I was right, I'd need evidence. Adrian was a former police detective, professional and direct. I met him at his office downtown and laid out everything. The timeline of changed behavior, the inconsistencies in travel stories, the sudden shift from rejection to baby fever, and my suspicions about her relationship with Richard. I need to know what I'm dealing with, I told him. If she's having an affair, I can handle that. But if she's trying to pass off another man's child as mine, that's fraud, and I need legal protection. He took detailed notes, requested photos of Melissa, copies of her travel schedules, and the information about Richard that I could provide. His fee was substantial but worthwhile. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. It was about protecting myself from 18 years of financial responsibility for another man's child. While Adrian worked, I maintained my routine but became hyper-aware of every interaction. Melissa's mentions of Richard increased, always framed as professional updates, but delivered with that same uncomfortable undertone. She claimed the company was restructuring, explaining her increased workload and extended travel schedule. Her secrecy about work relationships became more obvious as I paid attention. "How are things with your team?" I'd ask over dinner. "Fine. Busy. Richard has us working on some major projects that require a lot of coordination." Always Richard. Richard thinks, Richard says, Richard wants. Never her other colleagues, never the broader team dynamics, just Richard's opinions and Richard's decisions. I found myself researching our prenuptial agreement during lunch breaks, reviewing the asset protection clauses I'd insisted on when we married. At the time, Melissa had resented what she called my lack of trust in our future. Now, those legal protections might be the only thing standing between me and financial devastation. I had a hypothetical conversation with a divorce attorney about paternity fraud laws in our state. The legal implications were serious. If I could prove attempted deception about paternity, it would void any claims she might have on my assets and potentially result in criminal charges. 3 weeks after hiring Adrian, he called with an urgent request to meet. His tone suggested he'd found what we both suspected, but there was something else, something that required a face-to-face conversation. When Adrian said, "It's not just an affair, Daniel. She's playing a longer game, and you're the mark." I knew my wife wasn't just cheating, she was running a con. I met Adrian at Murphy's Diner, a place far from both our neighborhoods where the coffee was terrible, but the corner booths offered privacy. He arrived with a manila envelope thick enough to contain a life sentence, and his expression told me everything I needed to know before he opened his mouth. "I wish I had better news," he said, sliding photographs across the scratched Formica table. "But you hired me to find the truth, and here it is." The first photo showed Melissa and Richard entering the Marriott downtown, her hand resting on his arm with casual familiarity. The timestamp indicated last Tuesday, when she'd claimed to be in client meetings until late. The second photo captured them at Benedetto's, an expensive Italian restaurant, sharing what was clearly an intimate dinner. Their body language, leaning across the table, fingers intertwined, her laughing at something he'd whispered, left no room for misinterpretation. "Hotel receipts," Adrian continued, spreading out more documents. "Same room booked under his corporate account. This has been going on for at least 4 months, probably longer. They're careful about their schedules, always coordinating around both your routines and his wife's." My hands remained steady as I examined each piece of evidence, but something cold was settling in my chest. This wasn't just infidelity. This was systematic deception involving my wife and a married man with children, both of them lying to their spouses. Adrian pulled out his phone and showed me screenshot after screenshot of text message exchanges. Their affair was documented in digital detail, meeting arrangements, expressions of affection, and most damaging, conversations about their future together. "Here's where it gets worse," Adrian said, his voice dropping lower. "She's pregnant, Daniel. Based on the timeline and her behavior patterns, she's carrying his child, not yours." The words hit like a physical blow, but the logical part of my mind had been preparing for this revelation. The timeline matched perfectly. 3 months of sexual rejection followed by desperate attempts at intimacy exactly when she would have discovered her pregnancy. Adrian showed me the most damaging evidence. Text messages where Melissa discussed her situation and mentioned needing to fix things with Daniel before. It's too late. She wasn't experiencing sudden maternal instincts. She was executing a carefully planned fraud designed to trick me into claiming paternity and providing 18 years of financial support for another man's child. "This isn't just adultery," Adrian explained. "This is conspiracy to commit paternity fraud. She's attempting to deceive you about the biological father of her child for financial gain. In this state, that's both civil fraud and potentially criminal." I thought about all those evenings she'd spent researching baby names and nursery furniture, the excited way she'd talked about converting the spare room, her impatience when I delayed because of my medication. She wasn't planning our future family. She was covering up her betrayal and ensuring I'd be legally and financially responsible for the consequences. "What about Richard?" I asked. "Married for 16 years, 2 teenage kids. His wife Sarah has no idea. Based on their messages, he's been making promises to Melissa about leaving his family, but there's no indication he's actually planning to do it. She's pregnant with his child, and he's stringing her along while maintaining his comfortable suburban life." We discussed strategy for the next phase. Adrian would continue documenting the affair, gathering more evidence of their relationship and any communications about the pregnancy and paternity deception. I needed to protect my assets immediately. The prenup would help, but I needed legal advice about the specific fraud implications. Most importantly, I needed to maintain my facade at home while preparing for a confrontation that would expose not just the affair, but the calculated attempt to destroy my life through paternity fraud. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't experienced since discovering faulty wiring that could have burned down a house, a cold, methodical anger focused on preventing catastrophic damage. This wasn't just personal betrayal anymore. This was criminal fraud that could have cost me everything I'd worked to build. That evening, I watched Melissa excitedly browse nursery furniture online, talking animatedly about color schemes and crib safety ratings. She seemed genuinely enthusiastic, lost in the fantasy of domestic bliss she was constructing around her deception. "What do you think about this one?" she asked, showing me an expensive convertible crib. "It grows with the baby, converts to a toddler bed later." I had to leave the room. The casual way she discussed 18 years of commitment while carrying another man's child, it was breathtakingly cold. That night, watching her research cribs online, I realized she wasn't planning to lie to me for 9 months. She was planning to lie to me for the next 18 years. That's when I decided to end her game permanently. I planned the confrontation like I'd plan a complex electrical installation, every connection tested, every possible outcome mapped in advance. The timing had to be perfect. After Melissa returned from her latest business trip, which Adrian confirmed was actually a romantic weekend with Richard at a resort in Virginia, she'd be relaxed and confident in her deception. That's when people make mistakes. I spent the week preparing everything. Divorce papers drawn up by the best family attorney in the city, focusing specifically on fraud and paternity deception. Copies of all evidence organized in multiple folders. My lawyer on standby for immediate filing. Bank accounts protected through legal separation of assets. And most crucially, copies of everything already prepared for delivery to Richard's wife, Sarah, and their company's HR department. Thursday evening. Melissa had been home for 2 days, glowing with what she attributed to pregnancy hormones, but which I now recognized as the satisfaction of a successful deception. She'd spent the afternoon researching pediatricians and making lists of baby essentials, playing her role with Academy Award dedication. I found her in the living room where we'd once planned our future together, laptop open to a website selling designer baby furniture. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was literally shopping for another man's child with my expected financial support. "Melissa," I said, settling into the chair across from her, "we need to talk." Something in my tone made her look up from the laptop. I'd practiced keeping my voice calm, conversational, giving nothing away. "Is everything okay?" she asked, closing the laptop with casual concern. "I was hoping you could tell me. Is there anything you want to share about your trip? Anything important I should know?" She launched into the same fabricated story she'd been polishing for months. Client meetings, difficult negotiations, late dinners with colleagues. Every word was a calculated lie delivered with the confidence of someone who believed she'd covered every angle. I let her finish. Then I placed the divorce papers on the coffee table between us. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, shock, then rapidly calculating damage control. "Daniel, what is this?" "What's wrong?" "I know about Richard," I said simply. The color drained from her face. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. For the first time in months, she was genuinely speechless. "I know about the affair, Melissa. I know about the hotels, the restaurants, the text messages planning your meetings around both our schedules. I know about all of it." She tried to recover, shifting into manipulation mode. "Daniel, you don't understand. Yes, Richard and I became close, but it's not what you think. The pressure at work?" "I haven't finished," I interrupted. "I also know you're pregnant." This stopped her completely. The performance crumbled, replaced by raw calculation as she realized how much I actually knew. "Daniel, listen to me," she said, her voice taking on a desperate edge. "I'm pregnant. We're having a baby. This is what we've wanted." "We haven't been intimate in months, Melissa. That baby isn't mine." The silence stretched between us like a live wire. She stared at me, her mind racing through options, looking for an angle that could salvage her position. "You can't prove that," she said finally, which was as good as a confession. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the manila envelope, spreading Adrian's evidence across the coffee table. Hotel receipts with their names, restaurant charges for romantic dinners, photographs of them entering buildings together. text message screenshots discussing their affair and her situation. Her corporate confidence shattered as she saw the scope of what I'd discovered. Every lie documented, every deception exposed, every moment of their affair captured in undeniable evidence. "Here's what you don't know," I said, my voice still conversational. "I've already sent copies of everything to Sarah Hartwell. She received them this morning along with a full report from the private investigator. She's filing for divorce and taking the kids." Melissa's face went white. "You didn't. I also sent copies to your company's HR department. Apparently, workplace affairs involving executives are serious policy violations, especially when they affect professional judgment and company resources. Both you and Richard are being terminated." I watched the reality hit her in waves. Her career, her financial security, Richard's availability, everything she'd been counting on was disappearing simultaneously. "The timeline is clear, Melissa. 3 months of refusing intimacy with your husband, followed immediately by pregnancy and desperate attempts to re-establish sexual contact. Any family court will see the pattern. You were trying to commit paternity fraud, and in this state that's both civil fraud and criminal deception." She tried one last desperate play. "Daniel, please. We can work this out. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. The baby isn't mine, and you know it. The prenup you resented signing protects me from exactly this situation. You'll get nothing from me, and Richard won't be available to support you since he's about to lose everything too." Her attempts to bargain, threaten, or manipulate bounced off the wall of evidence I'd built. Every angle was covered, every escape route blocked. The systematic approach that made me good at electrical work had also made me thorough in protecting myself from her deception. By midnight, she was packing a suitcase with shaking hands. Her confident corporate persona had completely collapsed, replaced by the dawning realization that her carefully planned fraud had backfired catastrophically. She'd lost her marriage, her career, her financial security, and the man she'd been planning a future with. As her taillights disappeared down our street, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. Not satisfaction, not victory, just the quiet calm that comes from solving a complex problem correctly. As her taillights disappeared, I realized the most satisfying revenge isn't destroying someone, it's letting them destroy themselves while you watch from safety. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my garage workshop, rewiring an antique radio that belonged to my grandfather. The work is methodical, peaceful, problems with clear solutions and results you can measure. It's become my evening routine since the divorce was finalized, these quiet hours fixing things that were broken by time rather than deception. The legal proceedings went exactly as my attorney predicted. The prenup held firm, and the overwhelming evidence of Melissa's fraud left her with no legal standing. She received nothing from our marriage except the clothes she packed that final night. The attempted paternity fraud charges were dropped in exchange for her agreement to never contact me again. But the civil implications were devastating enough. Richard's destruction was even more complete. Sarah Hartwell proved to be as thorough as I was, hiring her own investigators and attorneys. She took the house, the children, and half of his substantial assets. Their teenage kids refused to speak to him, understanding exactly what their father's choices cost their family. The company fired him immediately to avoid the scandal, and word spread quickly through the industry. At 48, he's starting over with a destroyed reputation and crushing alimony payments. Melissa had tried desperately to rebuild her relationship with Richard once her deception was exposed, believing they could face the consequences together. But Richard wanted nothing to do with her once his own comfortable life imploded. Her romantic fantasy of their future together evaporated the moment it cost him everything he actually valued. She's raising the child alone now, in a small apartment across town, unemployed and financially devastated. The baby was born 2 months ago, definitely Richard's son based on the timing and physical resemblance. Her attempts to contact me are immediately redirected through my attorney, who maintains strict no-contact enforcement. Sometimes I see her car in the grocery store parking lot, but she's learned to avoid places where we might encounter each other. The industry blackballing was swift and complete. Word about workplace affairs and professional misconduct travels fast in corporate circles. Both she and Richard are effectively unemployable in marketing leadership roles, reduced to entry-level positions that pay a fraction of their previous salaries. My house is quiet now. But it's a comfortable quiet, rather than the tense silence that marked the final months of my marriage. I've learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. The garage workshop has become my sanctuary, projects that challenge my skills without threatening my peace of mind. Jake stops by occasionally, bringing beer and updates from the job sites. He was the one who recommended Adrian Ross, and he's genuinely proud of how I handled the situation. "You could have confronted her privately," he said last week. "Tried to work things out, kept it quiet. She wasn't just cheating," I replied. "She was trying to commit paternity fraud. That required consequences that matched its severity." The prenup I insisted on during our engagement, which Melissa had resented as evidence of my pessimistic view of marriage, became my financial salvation. I remember her bitter comment when she signed it. "If you expect our marriage to fail, why are we getting married at all?" she had asked. At the time, I'd explained it as protecting both of us from financial catastrophe if things went wrong. Now I understand it was protecting me from something much more deliberate. I've started dating again, nothing serious, but it's good to remember that honest relationships are possible. The experience taught me to trust my instincts. When someone's behavior doesn't align with their words, there's usually a reason worth investigating. Sometimes people ask if I feel guilty about destroying two families so completely. The answer is simple. I didn't destroy anything. I exposed the destruction they were already causing through their choices. My only responsibility was protecting myself from becoming collateral damage in their deception. The truth has a way of surfacing eventually. My only advantage was controlling when and how it emerged, ensuring I was protected when the consequences hit. Sometimes the best revenge isn't active destruction, it's simply letting the truth run its course while you watch from safety. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.